The separation and new beginnings. Olivia Matthews gazed at the twinkling city skyline from her small but cozy apartment, her hands gently resting on her growing belly. The soft evening breeze through the window felt like a whisper of hope, a contrast to the emotional whirlwind she had endured over the past months. At 8 months pregnant, her life had taken a path she never expected, and yet she felt a sense of resolve she never knew she possessed. 6 months ago, Olivia's world was entirely different. She had been living in a sprawling penthouse with Marcus Blackwood, a man she once believed was her soulmate. Marcus, a tech mogul known for his charm and intelligence, had captured her heart swiftly and completely. Their relationship had unfolded like a fairy tale. Glamorous dinners, trips to exotic locales, and promises of a future they would build together. But everything had changed when she discovered she was pregnant. Olivia remembered that day vividly. The shock on Marcus's face when she told him the news had been like a punch to the gut. His initial disbelief quickly turned into avoidance, and within weeks, the cracks in their seemingly perfect relationship began to show. Marcus wasn't ready to be a father. The fear of responsibility, of losing control over his carefully constructed life, pushed him away from her. Olivia had thought they could work through it, that love would be enough to overcome his hesitation. But instead of support, she was met with his cold indifference. Faced with the heart-wrenching realization that Marcus would never step up, Olivia had made the hardest decision of her life. She left. She couldn't stay in a relationship where her child wouldn't be welcomed with open arms. Olivia had always been independent, determined, and ambitious. She had her own career as a lawyer to think about, and she wasn't willing to compromise her principles or her baby's future for a man, even one she loved deeply. In the months that followed, Olivia rebuilt her life piece by piece. She moved into her own place, a far cry from the luxury of Marcus's penthouse. But it was hers, and that mattered more. She continued working at her law firm, pushing through the exhaustion of pregnancy and the emotional weight of her separation. It hadn't been easy. Late nights, early mornings, and the constant internal battle between grief and determination. But Olivia knew that she had made the right choice for herself and her unborn child. Tonight, however, was different. Olivia had been invited to an exclusive charity gala at the Ritz-Carlton, an event that could potentially elevate her career even further. As the firm's newest junior partner, it was important for her to network and make connections. She was nervous, but her resilience had carried her this far, and she wasn't going to let self-doubt stop her now. The ballroom was nothing short of opulent, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed crowd. Olivia had never felt more out of place, her simple yet elegant maternity dress contrasting with the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos that filled the room. Still, she held her head high. She belonged here, not because of her attire but because of her accomplishments. The baby growing inside her was not a burden but a symbol of her strength. As she moved through the crowd, mingling with a few familiar faces from the legal world, Olivia's mind drifted. She wondered about Marcus. Despite everything, she couldn't deny that a part of her still missed him. The man he used to be before fear and responsibility had torn them apart. She wondered if he ever thought about her, if he ever regretted how things had ended. But she quickly shook those thoughts away. Tonight was about the future, not the past. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Blackwood was pacing in his office. He was supposed to be at the same charity gala, but he couldn't bring himself to go. His life had become a blur of board meetings, product launches, and late-night coding sessions. On the outside, he was the picture of success, a young CEO at the helm of his family's tech empire, admired and envied by many. But on the inside, he felt hollow. Since Olivia had left, Marcus had thrown himself into his work, trying to fill the void she left behind. At first, he had convinced himself it was for the best. He wasn't ready for fatherhood. His career was his priority. But as the months passed, the emptiness grew, and so did the regret. He missed her, the way she laughed, the way she challenged him, the way she loved him despite his flaws. Most of all, He missed the future they had once envisioned together, a future that now seemed like a distant dream. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the child, his child. The weight of his actions bore down on him every day. He knew he had made a terrible mistake by letting Olivia go, but he had been too proud, too afraid to admit it. He had thought about reaching out to her so many times, but every time he picked up the phone, fear held him back. What if she didn't want to hear from him? What if it was too late? Back at the gala, Olivia's evening was going better than she had expected. She had managed to engage in a few productive conversations, and despite her initial nervousness, she felt more at ease. Just as she was about to step away to get a drink, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Olivia. She froze. Slowly, she turned around, her breath catching in her throat. Standing there, looking as handsome and conflicted as ever, was Marcus Blackwood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing there, staring at each other. Marcus's eyes widened as they traveled to her belly, now impossible to hide under the soft fabric of her dress. The shock in his expression was undeniable. Olivia. I didn't know, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. He looked as if the wind had been knocked out of him. I didn't know you were pregnant. She finished for him, her tone more steady than she felt. Yes, Marcus. I'm 8 months along. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words. Marcus's mind was racing. He hadn't seen Olivia in months, and now, here she was, standing in front of him, carrying their child. How had he let it get to this point? I don't know what to say, Marcus stammered, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. Olivia. You don't have to say anything, Marcus. Olivia interrupted, her voice calm but firm. I'm doing fine. The baby and I are doing fine. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. He had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was here, he was paralyzed by guilt and regret. How could he make up for what he had done? How could he even begin to apologize? But Olivia wasn't waiting for an apology. She had moved on, or at least, she was trying to. She had built a life for herself and her child, and she wasn't going to let Marcus derail that. Still, seeing him again stirred emotion she had buried deep inside her heart. Why are you here, Marcus? She asked, her eyes searching his. I don't know, he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. I guess I just couldn't stay away. Olivia felt a mixture of emotions swirl inside her, anger, sadness, and a sliver of hope she had long tried to extinguish. The unfinished conversation. The air between Olivia and Marcus was thick with tension as they stood together, yet miles apart emotionally, in the crowded ballroom. Olivia's pulse raced, her mind struggling to process the flood of emotions seeing Marcus again had unleashed. She had anticipated many things tonight, awkward small talk, potential business connections, but never this, never him. Marcus, too, was battling an internal storm. The sight of Olivia's rounded belly had struck him like a lightning bolt. He had known she was pregnant, but seeing the undeniable proof was a different experience altogether. The baby wasn't some abstract concept anymore. It was real, tangible, and he had missed so much already. I didn't expect to see you here, Olivia said after a long silence, her tone neutral but carrying an edge. She wasn't going to make this easy for him, nor should she. Marcus had forfeited the right to her kindness the day he had let fear drive her away. I didn't expect to be here either, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit she recognized from their time together. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep avoiding you forever. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Avoiding me? Is that what you've been doing? Marcus flinched at her sharp tone. He had come to the gala on a whim, intending to show up late, make an appearance, and leave quietly. He didn't think he'd actually run into her. But now that he had, there was no turning back. It was time to face the mess he had made. I know I've been distant, he said quietly, guilt tightening his chest. But I thought it was what you wanted. After everything, I didn't think you'd want me around. Olivia's eyes flashed. You didn't think I'd want you around, she repeated, incredulous. Marcus, you didn't give me a chance to want anything. You decided for both of us when you pulled away. You made it clear that you weren't ready for this baby, this life. So, no, you don't get to act like you were just waiting for my permission. The sting of her words landed hard, and Marcus could only nod. She was right. He had made assumptions, terrible ones, and now they were both paying the price. He had tried to escape the responsibility, but it had only led him right back to the moment he feared most, facing her, facing the consequences of his cowardice. I was scared, Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to handle it. My whole life was about control, and when you told me you were pregnant, I felt like I was losing control of everything. Olivia crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. And what about me, Marcus? Did you ever stop to think about what I was going through? I didn't have the luxury of running away. I had to face this head-on, alone. Her words hung in the air like a bitter truth, and Marcus knew he had no defense. He had failed her when she needed him most. The weight of his regret was suffocating. I know, he said, his voice strained. I know I let you down. And I'm sorry, Olivia. I'm so sorry. But I don't want to keep making the same mistake. I don't want to lose you, or the baby. Olivia's heart ached at his words, but she wasn't ready to let him off the hook that easily. Marcus's apologies, though heartfelt, couldn't undo the months of pain and solitude she had endured. She had built a life without him, and she wasn't about to let his sudden change of heart derail everything. I don't know if that's enough, Marcus, Olivia said, her voice soft but resolute. I've been doing this on my own for months now. I've gotten used to it. I'm not the same person I was when we were together. Marcus swallowed hard. He could see it in her eyes. The strength, the resilience. She had grown in ways he hadn't anticipated, and though he admired her for it, he was also painfully aware that the distance between them had widened. I don't expect you to just let me back into your life, Marcus said, taking a tentative step closer. But I want to be there for you, for both of you. I want to try to make things right. Olivia sighed, her hand instinctively resting on her belly as their baby gave a little kick. She had been strong for so long, carrying the weight of her decisions and the responsibilities of motherhood alone. Part of her wanted to believe Marcus's words, to trust that he could change. But trust wasn't something she could just hand over anymore. It had to be earned. What does making things right even mean, Marcus? She asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to go back to the way it was. We're not the same people we were 6 months ago. Marcus nodded, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. He didn't expect it to be easy. He knew he had a long road ahead if he wanted to prove that he could be the partner and father they both deserved. I don't know what it looks like yet, he confessed, his eyes pleading with hers. But I'm willing to figure it out, whatever it takes. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away, and I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I want a chance to be part of this. Olivia studied him for a long moment, her emotions a confusing swirl of anger, hurt, and something that felt uncomfortably close to hope. She had always loved Marcus, but love alone hadn't been enough to hold them together. Could they really rebuild after everything that had happened? Before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted them. Olivia, there you are. Olivia turned to see Samantha, one of her colleagues from the law firm, striding toward them with a bright smile. I've been looking for you all evening. We need to catch up with Judge Harris before he leaves. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I interrupting something? Samantha's gaze shifted between Olivia and Marcus, and Olivia quickly composed herself. No, it's fine, she said, forcing a smile. I was just catching up with an old friend. Marcus flinched slightly at the word friend, but he said nothing. He knew this wasn't the time or place to push the conversation any further. Olivia needed space, and he had to respect that. Samantha glanced at Marcus, her eyes widening in recognition. Wait, you're Marcus Blackwood, aren't you? I've read about you in the tech journals. Silicon Valley's youngest CEO, right? Marcus nodded, giving her a polite smile. That's me. Samantha's enthusiasm was palpable. Wow, it's great to meet you. Olivia never mentioned she knew you. Olivia shot Samantha a look that made it clear this wasn't the time for such comments. We should probably go find Judge Harris, Olivia said quickly, eager to escape the awkwardness of the situation. Samantha, oblivious to the tension, nodded eagerly. Yes, let's go. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Blackwood. With that, Olivia turned to Marcus one last time. I have to go, she said, her voice soft but firm. But we'll talk. Soon. Marcus nodded, feeling a small glimmer of hope. I'll be waiting, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. As Olivia walked away with Samantha, Marcus watched her go, his heart heavy with the weight of their unfinished conversation. He knew that getting back into Olivia's life wouldn't be easy, but he was more determined than ever. He had already lost too much time. He couldn't afford to lose any more. For Olivia, the evening had taken an unexpected turn. Seeing Marcus again had stirred emotions she thought she had buried. But as much as part of her wanted to believe he had changed, another part of her remained cautious. She had been strong on her own, and she wasn't about to let anyone, especially Marcus, disrupt the life she had built. As she left the ballroom and stepped into the cool night air, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would test both her strength and her heart in ways she had yet to imagine. Bridging the distance, the soft light of the early morning sun filtered through the curtains of Olivia's apartment as she sat at her small kitchen table, sipping a cup of herbal tea. Her thoughts drifted back to the previous night's encounter with Marcus, the intensity of his eyes when he had seen her pregnant belly for the first time, the quiet plea in his voice when he asked for a chance to be a part of her life again. It had stirred something deep within her, emotion she had carefully tucked away to protect herself. But she couldn't forget. For the last 6 months, Olivia had grown accustomed to navigating life without him. She had gone through her pregnancy alone, with only the support of her close friends and colleagues. The thought of letting Marcus back into her life, and into their child's life, terrified her. What if he disappeared again? What if his newfound resolve was temporary, a fleeting moment of guilt? Still, his words echoed in her mind. He wanted to make things right. But what did that even look like? Could she trust him to stay this time? As Olivia absent-mindedly rubbed her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her baby, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and saw a message from Marcus. Hesitating for a moment, she finally opened it. Marcus, I know we didn't finish our conversation last night. I'd like to meet with you, somewhere quiet, just the two of us. Whenever you're ready. Olivia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. He was persistent. That much was clear. Part of her admired that he hadn't just walked away after their brief interaction, but another part of her was cautious, guarded. She had been down this road before. But she knew this couldn't remain unresolved forever. With a deep breath, she typed a reply. Olivia, we can meet tomorrow afternoon. There's a cafe near my place, the Corner Bean. 2 p.m. As soon as she hit send, she felt a surge of anxiety. This wasn't just about seeing Marcus again. It was about confronting the uncertain future they both faced, individually and as potential co-parents. The following day, Olivia stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the soft cardigan she wore over her dress. Her belly was now unmistakably prominent, a constant reminder of the new life growing inside her. She had reached a point where bending down was nearly impossible, and her feet were swollen from carrying the extra weight. But despite the physical discomfort, she felt strong. Motherhood had given her a strength she hadn't known before. Arriving at the small cafe, Olivia took a seat by the window. It was a quaint little spot, quiet and unassuming, with the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. She had chosen this place deliberately, neutral ground, somewhere that felt familiar and comforting. Marcus arrived promptly, dressed in casual clothes for once, a stark contrast to the tuxedo he had worn the night before. He scanned the cafe until his eyes landed on her, and for a moment, they both simply stared at each other across the room. As he approached the table, Marcus gave her a tentative smile, clearly unsure of how to begin. "Hey," he said softly, pulling out the chair across from her. "Hey," Olivia replied, her voice steady, but her heart racing. She hadn't expected to feel so nervous. For a few moments, they sat in silence, both trying to find the right words to break the tension. It was Marcus who finally spoke. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, his hands resting on the table. "I've been thinking about last night, about everything, really, and I realized how much I need to be honest with you." Olivia raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to expect. Honest about what? Marcus took a deep breath, his gaze meeting hers. "About why I pushed you away. It wasn't just fear of responsibility, though that was part of it. It was more than that." Olivia stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "I spent my entire life being in control," Marcus said, his voice raw with emotion. "My career, my family, everything. It was all about being the best, about winning. When you told me you were pregnant, it scared the hell out of me because it was something I couldn't control. I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't even know how to be a good partner." Olivia's expression softened slightly, but she still held her guard up. "So you just decided to run?" Marcus nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "I was selfish, Olivia. I thought focusing on my career would make everything easier, that if I threw myself into work, I could avoid facing my fear. But all that did was make me realize how much I'd lost, how much I've been losing every day without you." Olivia's heart ached at his words, but she wasn't ready to let her emotions take over. "And now, what's changed?" "I have," Marcus said firmly. "These past few months, I've had a lot of time to think. About us, about the baby, about who I want to be. I don't want to be the man who runs away from his responsibilities. I don't want to be the man who abandoned you when you needed me most." Olivia looked down at her hands, her mind racing. Could she believe him? Could she trust that this wasn't just another empty promise? "Marcus," she began slowly, choosing her words carefully, "I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago either. I've been doing this alone for a long time, and I've built a life for myself and this baby. I'm not going to let you walk in and disrupt everything just because you've had a change of heart." "I don't expect you to," Marcus replied, leaning forward, his gaze intense. "I know I've got a lot to prove. I'm not asking for you to forgive me right now, and I'm not asking you to just let me back into your life like nothing happened. I just want a chance to be a part of this, to be there for you, for the baby, whatever that looks like." Olivia sighed, feeling the weight of his words. It was clear that Marcus was sincere, that he truly wanted to change, but sincerity wasn't enough. She had been through too much to simply let her guard down. "I don't know, Marcus," she said honestly. "It's not that simple. We can't just pick up where we left off." "I know," Marcus said, his voice softer now. "But maybe we can start fresh, not as the people we were, but as the people we are now. I'm not asking for everything to be perfect. I just want to be a part of our child's life. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me." Olivia looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. Marcus was offering her something she had longed for, but had convinced herself she didn't need: partnership. She had spent months preparing to raise her child alone, steeling herself against the loneliness and the challenges of single motherhood. But now, with Marcus standing before her, offering to share the burden, she felt conflicted. "I'm not making any promises," Olivia said after a long pause. "I'll give you a chance, but only if you're serious about this. I won't let you hurt me or the baby again." Marcus nodded, relief flooding his features. "I am serious, Olivia. More than I've ever been about anything." They sat in silence for a few moments, the tension slowly easing as the conversation began to shift from the past to the future. Marcus asked her about the baby, whether she had picked out names, how the pregnancy was going, and whether she had a birth plan. Olivia found herself opening up, sharing details she had kept to herself for months. It felt strange, but also comforting, to talk about their child with Marcus. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. As their conversation continued, Olivia couldn't help but notice how different Marcus seemed. He was still the same man she had fallen in love with, confident, driven, and charming. But there was a new layer to him now. A vulnerability, a willingness to admit his mistakes that hadn't been there before. It gave her hope, but also made her wary. After they finished their drinks, Olivia stood, ready to head home. Marcus stood too, looking hesitant but determined. "Can I walk you home?" he asked, his voice tentative. Olivia hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right." As they walked through the city streets, the autumn air crisp and cool around them, Olivia felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't the reunion she had expected, but it was something. A beginning, perhaps. And as much as she feared getting hurt again, a small part of her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. Maybe they could build something new, something stronger, from the broken pieces of their past. But for now, Olivia knew she had to take things one step at a time. Trust, after all, had to be earned. The weight of rebuilding. The days that followed their conversation at the cafe were a whirlwind for Olivia. She returned to her routine, balancing her demanding job at the law firm with the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy. But now, something had shifted. Marcus had re-entered her life, and with him came a new set of challenges and uncertainties. It was as if she had built a sturdy wall around herself over the past months, and now, brick by brick, it was being dismantled by the man she had once loved, who was now asking for a second chance. Olivia hadn't agreed to anything more than allowing Marcus into her life slowly with caution. She had made that clear from the beginning. But despite her best efforts to keep him at a distance, he was persistent in the way that only Marcus could be. He called regularly, asking about her doctor's appointments, and if there was anything he could do to help. He sent texts checking in on her well-being, even dropping off groceries at her apartment without asking for permission first, his way of ensuring she didn't overexert herself. Olivia would find herself annoyed by his over-involvement one moment, only to feel a surprising sense of relief the next. It was strange having someone care for her in that way after being so fiercely independent. One chilly afternoon, Olivia had a doctor's appointment to check on the baby's progress. It had become a regular part of her life, but this time, as she sat in the waiting room flipping through a magazine, she felt the weight of what was about to happen. Marcus was meeting her here. She had agreed to let him come to the appointment, a small step toward co-parenting, though it still felt overwhelming. When Marcus arrived, he looked out of place in the brightly lit clinic. Dressed in a tailored coat and polished shoes, he stood out among the other expectant fathers who seemed more comfortable in casual clothes and sneakers. Olivia couldn't help but smile faintly at the sight of him trying to blend in. His appearance was still so meticulous, so Marcus, even in a setting like this. He sat down beside her, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, as if he didn't want to disturb the quiet of the clinic. "Hey," Olivia replied, her own nerves beginning to surface. This was the first time they would share something so intimate since their separation. It felt significant, almost too much for her to handle, but she reminded herself that it was just an appointment. Nothing more. When her name was called, Olivia stood and glanced at Marcus. He followed her into the exam room, the tension between them palpable as they waited for the doctor. Olivia lay on the exam table, her hand resting on her swollen belly, while Marcus stood awkwardly by her side, unsure of what to do with himself. As the doctor came in and began the routine checkup, Olivia stole glances at Marcus. His eyes were glued to the ultrasound screen, where the grainy image of their baby appeared. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, a rapid, steady rhythm that always made Olivia feel a surge of love and protection. She could see the wonder in Marcus's expression, the way his face softened as he listened to the heartbeat for the first time. It was a look she hadn't seen in him before, an awe that seemed to break through the layers of control and precision he usually wore like armor. That's incredible," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He looked at Olivia, his eyes wide. "I didn't realize it would sound like that." Olivia couldn't help but smile at his reaction, though her heart was still guarded. "Yeah, it's pretty amazing." After the appointment, they walked out of the clinic together in silence. Marcus's demeanor had changed, and Olivia could sense the weight of the moment had hit him hard. He had been distant from her pregnancy, physically and emotionally, for so long, and now, in just a few minutes, he had been thrust into the reality of it all. As they reached the sidewalk, Marcus stopped, turning to face Olivia. "Thank you for letting me come today," he said earnestly. "I know it must have been hard for you, but it meant a lot to me." Olivia nodded, unsure of how to respond. "It's fine, Marcus. You deserve to be part of this, even if it's complicated." "It is complicated," he agreed, running a hand through his hair. "But I want to be there for you, for both of you. I know I can't change what happened before, but I can be different now." Olivia sighed, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up. "I hear what you're saying, Marcus, and I appreciate it. But being there isn't just about showing up to doctor's appointments. It's about being consistent, being reliable. I've had to do this on my own for so long, and I can't go back to relying on you if you're not fully committed." Marcus's eyes darkened with understanding. "I get it. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I just want the chance to prove I can be the father you and the baby deserve." Olivia remained silent, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to believe him, to let herself hope that things could be different this time. But her heart was still guarded, and rightfully so. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. A few weeks later, Olivia found herself in the thick of her work, the hustle of her law firm pulling her in multiple directions. Balancing her workload with the demands of her pregnancy was no small feat, and the fatigue had begun to set in. She spent most days with her feet swollen and her back aching, but she refused to slow down. Olivia was determined to prove she could handle it all, especially as her due date approached. But Marcus hadn't disappeared. He had been true to his word, showing up in small but meaningful ways. He continued calling regularly, asking if she needed anything, and even took on some of the more mundane tasks she found hard to manage as her pregnancy progressed, like carrying groceries up to her apartment or running errands. His presence, though still tentative, had become a steady hum in the background of her life, one that was slowly becoming harder to ignore. One afternoon, Olivia was preparing to leave the office when she received a call from Marcus. "I know you're probably busy," he said, his voice light, "but I was wondering if you'd let me help you with something." Olivia paused, curious. "What kind of help?" "I was thinking maybe we could go look at baby stuff together," Marcus suggested. "You know, cribs, strollers, clothes, all the things we'll need when the baby comes." Olivia was taken aback by the offer. She hadn't expected Marcus to be so involved in the preparations, and part of her still felt hesitant about letting him in. But the thought of going through it alone, yet again, weighed on her. Maybe, just maybe, letting him in for this part wouldn't be so bad. "All right," she agreed, her voice careful. "We can go this weekend." When the weekend arrived, Olivia met Marcus at one of the city's most popular baby boutiques. The store was filled with expectant parents, all browsing through the endless rows of baby products. As they entered, Olivia felt a surge of anxiety. She had been avoiding this moment, the reality of preparing for the baby's arrival. Part of her had delayed buying anything, as if putting it off would somehow make the impending change easier to handle. But now, with Marcus at her side, the reality hit her squarely in the chest. This was happening. Soon. They wandered through the store, Olivia pointing out items while Marcus listened attentively. They discussed cribs and debated the merits of various stroller models, all the while keeping the conversation focused on the practical. It was easier that way, safer. But as they moved through the aisles, Olivia couldn't help but notice how invested Marcus seemed. He asked questions, compared options, and seemed genuinely interested in finding the best for their baby. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it made her heart ache with a mixture of hope and caution. As they left the store, bags in hand, Marcus turned to Olivia. "This feels real now, doesn't it?" he said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Olivia nodded, her heart heavy with the truth. "Yeah, it does." Marcus glanced at her, his expression softening. "I know this is still hard for you. I know I have a lot to prove, but I'm not going anywhere. Olivia, I'm here." Olivia looked at him, her mind swirling with doubt and the smallest glimmer of hope. Could he really be here for the long haul? Could she trust that he wouldn't leave again when things got hard? "I hope that's true," she said quietly, her voice laced with the vulnerability she had tried so hard to bury. "Because I can't do this alone forever." Marcus reached out, gently placing a hand on her arm, his touch warm and steady. "You won't have to," he promised. "Not anymore." As they stood there, surrounded by the bustle of the city, Olivia felt the weight of the past months beginning to lift. It wasn't gone, not yet, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. And for the first time, she wasn't entirely afraid of letting that hope take root. The walls began to crumble. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia found herself navigating the complexities of a new normal. Marcus had become more involved in her life than she'd ever anticipated, and though she was cautious, a part of her was beginning to accept his presence. His actions were consistent. He wasn't just saying the right things anymore. He was doing them. Whether it was picking her up from work after long days at the law firm, or making sure she had everything she needed for the baby, Marcus was showing up. And that, in itself, was something Olivia had feared would never happen. But despite his efforts, Olivia's guard remained firmly in place. She couldn't afford to let it down. Not fully. She had spent months protecting herself from the emotional aftermath of their separation, and though Marcus seemed different now, the fear of being hurt again lingered just beneath the surface. She wasn't ready to let him see how much she still cared for him, how deeply his departure had wounded her. She wasn't sure she ever would be. One crisp autumn morning, as Olivia sat at her kitchen table reviewing case notes for an upcoming court hearing, the doorbell rang. It was Marcus, as he had promised, arriving to take her to another doctor's appointment. These had become a regular occurrence. Marcus showing up like clockwork, always on time, always prepared, and always asking questions about the baby's health. But today was different. Today was the appointment where they would find out the baby's gender. Olivia had been ambivalent about finding out, part of her wanting to keep the mystery alive until the birth, part of her needing to prepare as much as possible. Marcus, however, had been eager to know. He had asked if she would be okay with finding out together, and after some hesitation, she had agreed. "Ready to go?" Marcus asked, his tone light, but his eyes betraying the nervous energy he felt. "Yeah," Olivia said, standing slowly and reaching for her coat. Her belly, now unmistakably large, made even the simplest tasks like bending down to grab her purse more difficult. Marcus noticed her struggle and stepped forward, offering his hand. She hesitated, then took it, allowing him to help her as she stood up. It was a small moment, but one that carried more weight than either of them acknowledged aloud. As they drove to the doctor's office, the silence between them was comfortable, yet charged with anticipation. Marcus glanced over at Olivia from time to time, as if he was about to say something, then stopped himself. Olivia kept her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, her mind swirling with questions she wasn't ready to ask aloud. They arrived at the clinic and made their way inside. As Olivia lay on the exam table, her belly exposed for the ultrasound, Marcus stood beside her, his expression tense but hopeful. The doctor moved the ultrasound wand across Olivia's belly, and within moments, the grainy black and white image of their baby appeared on the screen. "There's the little one," the doctor said with a smile, "and it looks like we're ready to find out the gender. Do you want me to tell you?" Olivia glanced at Marcus, who was staring at the screen, his eyes wide with wonder. She nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "It's a girl," the doctor said, her voice gentle. Marcus's reaction was instant. His face softened and a smile broke across his lips, a genuine, unguarded smile that Olivia hadn't seen in months. "A girl," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "We're having a daughter." Olivia watched him, her heart tightening in her chest. She hadn't expected the flood of emotions that came with hearing those words. A girl. Their daughter. For the first time, the reality of it all hit her with full force. This wasn't just a hypothetical future anymore. This was real. In just a few short weeks, she would be holding their child, a little girl who would depend on both of them. Tears pricked at the corners of Olivia's eyes, and she quickly blinked them away, refusing to let her emotions get the better of her. She couldn't afford to let Marcus see how vulnerable she felt. Not yet. The doctor wrapped up the appointment, and soon Olivia and Marcus were back in the car, driving home in silence. But this time, the silence was different. It wasn't the awkward, tension-filled quiet of before. It was a silence filled with the weight of what had just happened. A silence that spoke louder than words. Marcus finally broke it as they neared Olivia's apartment. "A girl," he said again, almost as if he was still processing the news. "I can't believe it." Olivia smiled faintly, her hand resting on her belly. "I know. It's surreal." Marcus pulled the car over in front of her building but didn't turn off the engine. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression serious. "Olivia, I know I've said this before, but I want you to know that I'm all in. For her. For you. I don't care how long it takes for you to trust me again. I'll wait. But I'm not going anywhere." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to him, her emotions swirling. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he had changed, that he would stay this time. But her mind kept reminding her of the pain she had endured, the nights she had cried herself to sleep after he had pulled away. "I know you mean well, Marcus," Olivia said carefully, her voice steady. "But this isn't just about showing up to doctor's appointments or buying baby furniture. This is about you proving that you're here for the long haul. You walked away once, and I can't go through that again. I won't." Marcus's gaze softened, his expression filled with regret. "I understand, and I'll prove it to you. I'll prove it to both of you. I know I messed up, but I'm not that same man anymore." Olivia looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, any indication that he was just saying what she wanted to hear. But all she saw was sincerity. For the first time in a long time, she let herself consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Marcus was telling the truth. But that didn't mean she was ready to let her walls down completely. "Okay," Olivia said after a long pause, "but you have to understand, Marcus, this isn't going to be easy. I've been doing this on my own for a long time, and I'm used to not relying on anyone else. I'm not ready to just hand over my trust again." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I get that, and I don't expect you to. But I'll be here, Olivia. I'm not going anywhere." As he spoke, a quiet determination filled the space between them, and Olivia felt the weight of his words settle over her. She wanted to believe him. Truly, she did. But belief wasn't enough. She needed action. She needed time. And so, they fell into a tentative rhythm over the next few weeks. Marcus continued to show up, not just for appointments or baby preparations, but for Olivia. He began to spend more time with her, learning the intricacies of her life, the way she liked her tea, the shows she watched to unwind after work, the books she kept by her bedside. It was these small gestures, these tiny moments of connection, that began to chip away at the walls Olivia had built around her heart. One evening, as they sat in Olivia's living room discussing potential baby names, Marcus paused, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "You know," he said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what it means to be a father. I wasn't ready before, but I'm ready now. And I want to be the kind of man who deserves to be in your life." Olivia felt her throat tighten as she listened to him. His words were filled with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in him before, a rawness that made her heart ache. "I want to believe you, Marcus," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I really do." Marcus reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle, warm, and for the first time in months, Olivia didn't pull away. "Then believe me," he said softly, "I'm not going anywhere." As they sat there, hand in hand, the weight of the past months seemed to lift, if only for a moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, Olivia allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something from the ashes of their broken relationship. But as much as she wanted to believe in a future with Marcus, she knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Trust could be rebuilt, but it would take time. And time, as Olivia had learned, was never guaranteed. A new beginning. The day Olivia had been both anxiously awaiting and quietly dreading arrived sooner than she had expected. The final weeks of her pregnancy seemed to pass in a blur. Between work, preparing for the baby, and navigating her complicated relationship with Marcus, she had barely had time to breathe. But now, standing in the sterile hospital room with the sound of beeping monitors filling the space, everything else faded into the background. She was about to become a mother. The contractions had started in the middle of the night, a dull ache that soon became sharp and insistent. Olivia had been trying to tough it out alone, as she always had, but by the time the contractions were 5 minutes apart, she knew it was time. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her hospital bag, hastily packed weeks earlier, and called a car to take her to the hospital. In the chaos of the moment, she almost didn't think to call Marcus. But as the pain intensified, her instincts kicked in. He deserved to be there. After all, they had made this baby together. And despite all her reservations, Marcus had proven over the last few weeks that he was committed, not just in words, but in actions. So, between labored breaths, she dialed his number. Marcus picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy but immediately alert when he heard her gasping for breath. "I'm on my way to the hospital," Olivia managed, clutching her belly as another contraction hit. "The baby, she's coming." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Marcus replied, his voice sharp with urgency. "I'm coming, Olivia. Just hold on." By the time Marcus arrived at the hospital, Olivia had been admitted and was lying in a hospital bed, trying to focus on her breathing as the nurses moved around her, prepping her for delivery. The moment Marcus rushed into the room, his face pale and his eyes wide with worry, she felt a strange sense of relief. She had spent months preparing to do this alone, but now that he was here, she realized she didn't want to be alone. "You made it," Olivia said, her voice tight with pain as another contraction rippled through her. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. He reached for her hand, and this time, Olivia didn't hesitate. She gripped his hand tightly, finding comfort in his presence, even as the pain of labor racked her body. The hours that followed were some of the most intense and grueling of Olivia's life. She had never imagined labor would be so physically and emotionally demanding. There were moments when she felt like she couldn't go on, moments when the exhaustion seemed too much to bear. But every time she reached the brink, Marcus was there, his voice steady, his hand never letting go of hers. "You're doing amazing, Olivia," he whispered as she pushed through another contraction, his voice soothing despite the intensity of the situation. "Just a little longer. You've got this." And somehow, despite the pain, despite the fear, Olivia found the strength to keep going. After what felt like an eternity, the room was suddenly filled with a new sound, a tiny, high-pitched cry that cut through the chaos like a beacon of hope. The doctor's voice rang out, clear and triumphant. "It's a girl. Tears immediately filled Olivia's eyes as the nurse carefully placed the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby's cries quieted as she nestled against Olivia's chest, her small body warm and soft. In that moment, all the pain, all the uncertainty melted away, replaced by an overwhelming surge of love. "She's perfect," Olivia whispered, her voice choked with emotion as she gazed down at her daughter. "She's absolutely perfect." Marcus stood beside her, his eyes locked on the baby, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. He reached out tentatively, his hand brushing against the baby's tiny fingers. When she grasped his finger, his face softened and tears welled up in his eyes. She's incredible," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Olivia, we made this. We made her." Olivia nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. For so long she had feared this moment, feared that she wouldn't be enough, that she couldn't do this alone. But as she looked at her daughter and then at Marcus, she realized something profound. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The days following the birth of their daughter were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and feedings. Olivia's world had shifted entirely. Everything revolved around her daughter now. This tiny human who had so completely captured her heart. The exhaustion was real. The physical recovery was tough. But every time she looked at her daughter's sweet face, Olivia felt a joy unlike anything she had ever experienced. And Marcus, he had stepped up in ways Olivia hadn't expected. He was there, really there, for the long, sleepless nights, the frantic diaper changes, the late-night feedings. He wasn't just visiting, he was involved. He changed diapers, rocked the baby to sleep, and even sang lullabies in a low, soft voice that Olivia had never heard before. There was a gentleness to Marcus now, a quiet strength that had emerged in the wake of their daughter's birth. One evening, about 2 weeks after the baby was born, Marcus arrived at Olivia's apartment after work. He had been coming by regularly, helping with the baby and making sure Olivia had everything she needed. But tonight, something was different. He seemed more serious, his usual easy smile replaced with a look of quiet determination. "Olivia," Marcus began as he stood in the doorway, holding a bouquet of white lilies, her favorite. "There's something I need to talk to you about." Olivia, who had been cradling the baby in her arms, looked up, surprised by his tone. "What is it?" she asked, shifting the baby gently in her arms as she sat down on the couch. Marcus sat beside her, placing the flowers on the coffee table. He hesitated for a moment, then looked directly into her eyes. "I want to be more than just a co-parent. I want to be part of your life. Fully. I want us to be a family." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had known that something like this might happen eventually, but hearing the words out loud made her heart race. She had spent so long keeping Marcus at arm's length, guarding her heart against the possibility of being hurt again. But now, here he was, asking for a chance at something more, something real. "Marcus," she began, her voice soft but firm, "we've come a long way, but you know how hard this is for me. Trust doesn't just happen overnight. You left before, and I had to figure out how to do this on my own. I don't know if I'm ready to let you all the way back in." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I know. I've been thinking about that a lot. I don't expect you to just forgive me for everything and go back to how things were. I know we're different people now, but what I'm asking for is a chance to prove that I've changed, that I'm not going to walk away again." Olivia looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby's tiny hand rested on her chest, her fingers curling and uncurling as she dreamed. This little girl had changed everything, for both of them. And in that moment, Olivia realized that maybe she was ready to give Marcus the chance he was asking for. Maybe she was ready to let herself hope. But it wouldn't be easy. "I don't know what the future holds," Olivia said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "But I'm willing to try. For her, and for us." Marcus's face lit up with hope. He leaned forward, his hand brushing gently against Olivia's cheek. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance." Olivia smiled softly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future, not just as a mother, but as part of a family. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be challenges, and they would have to work through the pain of their past. But for the first time, Olivia believed that they could. Over the next few months, Olivia and Marcus settled into a rhythm, one that wasn't without its challenges but was built on something stronger than before. They weren't just co-parenting. They were rebuilding the foundation of their relationship, piece by piece. Marcus continued to show up, day after day, proving through his actions that he was there to stay. And slowly, Olivia began to let her walls down. There were moments of doubt, moments when Olivia's fear of being hurt again threatened to pull her back into her shell. But each time, Marcus was there, steady and patient, reminding her through his consistency that he wasn't going anywhere. As the months passed and their daughter grew, so did the bond between them. It wasn't the whirlwind romance they had once shared, but something deeper, something built on trust, commitment, and the shared love of their daughter. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, watching their daughter play on the floor with her toys, Olivia leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. "I'm glad you stayed," she whispered. Marcus smiled, wrapping his arm around her and pulling her closer. "I'm glad you gave me the chance." And in that moment, Olivia knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them together. As a family, a new beginning had finally arrived.